Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Backlog Battle Podcast. This is Alex, and in case this is the first time you're ever listened or watched the show, we talk to gamers from all walks of life to talk about what they create, what drives them to be passionate about the games that they play, and of course to get to know them a little bit more than what their channels would show who they are. And of course, today I have the wonderful and talented and smart LadyVirgilia joining us today. How's it going, lady?
Hi, Alex, and hi, all listeners. Thank you so much for having me again in this new podcast format. I'm really excited to be back. And yeah, just thank you for having me.
Yeah, we have some unresolved business from the last time because we kind of started talking about Final Fantasy XIV. We kind of started talking about your character studies for people and stuff. And there were some holes in the conversation that I wanted to plug. And of course, it's just great to have you on again because you were such a blast last time talking about Yarodora. And so why not? Now that we're in video format, people can see you now and your reactions and your cute headphones. It's so good.
I love these. These are also like Bluetooth when they're not plugged in. So it's really cool. Yeah, I like these. They also technically light up. Wait, where's the button? Can you see that?
I can see it. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, they
and it changes colors.
Up. Yeah.
And I will say the only way that you can actually see this light up is through the brand new video version of the podcast on youtube.com/backlog battle podcast. So thank you for giving people a reason to tune into the video version.
Wasn't planned, but here it is.
It really is. So, as I said, there were some holes in the conversation that we had that I'd like to plug. And the very first thing that I want to ask is the obvious thing that I didn't ask last time, which is, how the hell did you get into games? Like, because we just kind of started jumping into like Trails and Persona, but we never actually got that piece of the story. So can you tell me how this started?
So like, my dad would used to lead these Bible studies at our house, and like all these adults would bring their kids and stuff, right, who are all my age. So it's like while they were all doing that downstairs in our house, we would be playing games upstairs, like with the GameCube and everything. So I have really fond memories of like Mario Party and like Mario Kart, Super Smash Brothers Melee, like all of those really good like multiplayer back when like it wasn't all like Wi-Fi enabled and remote stuff. Like you just plug in the controllers, right? So I definitely have just like nostalgic memories of that. And honestly, it was kind of weird / odd that I didn't know. I still don't know that much about like computers and stuff, but like because my dad, thank goodness, like he was always more of like a PC person, even though he doesn't know that much about it either. Like I would get his old like setup or PC when he had to upgrade to like something even better, and he's just like, I'd rather just get a whole new like desktop and everything. And so I would get his old PC, and so I would also get to play like some MMOs, back in those days when there were a lot of those free, it's like free to play but like pay to win, right? Like Korean and Chinese and like Japanese MMOs. So that was a big part of like my, I guess, late elementary school, middle school, like, and then high school life. But then unfortunately there was just so much going on in high school and also when I went off to college for the first time. So I kind of fell off on video games for quite a while, like 5-ish years, 6-ish years. Like I kind of missed the whole end of like the PS3 and like that generation, and then also like the whole beginning of PS4 and that stuff. um but then due to actually I have like this neurological illness that I got in 2015. And basically I just had a lot more time because I just had to focus on recovery, like recovering my health and everything. And a lot of other stuff was put on hold. But the one thing that like I could do was like, oh, I can play games, in my free time and stuff. And so then I came back to it around like 2016, late 2016. I came back to games. And then that's how I really started getting back more into like JRPGs, of course, because I've played Nier and all that stuff like in the past a while ago. And then I just found like, oh my gosh, trails and
Yeah.
yeah, that stuff eventually.
Yeah, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm kind of curious then, because you said like you kind of started around the PS2 and the GameCube era. What would you say your formative games were during that period?
One of the major series that I will always have like the rose colored glasses for is the Harvest Moon series. It was like all those farming sim stuff. The like A Wonderful Life and Another Wonderful Life. And even I think it was called like Magical Melody or something on GameCube. I don't know what it was about them. It's kind of like addicting, like the farming sim thing. I guess that's the reason why a lot of people who play Stardew Valley, they're just like, oh my gosh, I don't know why it's so kind of addicting, but you lose track of time playing those. So that, and also, oh, I played so many Game Boy games too. How could I forget that? So Game Boy, oh my gosh, Pokemon Emerald. Wow, I think my save on that, it's so sad because I don't know where my cartridge went. So it's so sad. I had like over 300 hours, I
Oh
think,
my
on
god.
that game because I was making so many different teams and trying to beat the entire like battle frontier.
Hmm.
It was like really cool end game content for a Pokemon game. Um, yeah, so I think Pokemon Emerald, all the Harvest Moon games on GameCube and Game Boy too, like Mineral Town, Friends of Mineral Town, and like more Friends of Mineral Town, which was the girl version.
I see.
Like I played a lot of that. So I think those were probably the most formative things for me. Oh, wait, sorry, one more. I have really fond memories of Super Mario Sunshine.
Of course.
That was like so much fun with Flood.
Yeah.
That was such a cool concept. And that's why it was so cool to hear, they were bringing it back on Switch with that big triple
For a limited time,
yeah,
quote
for a
unquote.
limited time. I never actually got it myself, but I was glad that like people who missed out on Sunshine on GameCube were like able to play it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually played Sunshine in both Japanese and English because I was so hooked on it, because I was like, this is the best. And so I played it twice, and that is a hard game. It is not easy to play Sunshine at all. Like the amount of
For
dexterity that's needed to kind of do a lot of those jumps with Flood, and oh my goodness.
Yeah, it would be so frustrating when you're trying to climb up like all like the big mountains or something and you miss like a platform. I'm just like, oh no, I'm falling all the way back down. Oh,
Exactly.
that was so frustrating.
Exactly. And it's funny because if you remember that first area in the game where there's like a bunch of kind of like clotheslines and stuff, and then you have to kind of go from one to like the next level and the next. Because I played it recently and I was like, how the hell did I do this as a kid? Like, how, this is so tough. This is crazy.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because I saw some people streaming it, like the new one, and I'm just thinking, wow, how did we jump like off the buildings
Yeah.
too? Like just jumping off different buildings to get to the higher rooftops. I'm like, how did I figure that out when I was like super little? But hey,
Yeah.
here we go.
I do find it interesting, though, that the games that you mentioned are a combination of Pokemon and farming games. Because, you know, especially farming games, because in the series that you mentioned, because there's some really non-traditional kind of gameplay elements there, like marriage and, like, you know, that sort of thing. Like, I'm just kind of curious then, like, what do you think is what drove you to play those kinds of games? Because, yeah, like, this day and age, we can kind of say, like, well, Stardew Valley is kind of sort of an RPG, but it's not really. Like, they're very different in terms of the genre. So, yeah, I'm kind of curious what made you gravitate towards that.
Honestly, I guess it was just because my really good friend in elementary school, like she always had a ton of like different GameCube games lined up like at her house, and I would go to her house sometimes. And yeah, she would just we could play like whatever, and she had like everything. And the one thing that always stuck out to me was like the farming sim game, because it was just so it was so different, like it from the typical game. Like you're either fighting things or, you know, like the platformer, but even like the platforming games, you're technically fighting things, you know. So in Harvest Moon, you're just like taking care of cows and chickens, and yeah, and the kids. So in A Wonderful Life, I found that so funny that like I'm like, wow, Gabe, for real, are you saying like, oh, forever alone is not allowed? Because if you don't get married in like the first year of A Wonderful Life, your game ends. Like they won't let you keep going. It just ends. Yeah, and you have to reload your save. And like technically, if you never propose to any of like the girls, someone will propose to you to like, I guess, give you the option of, oh, I need to continue my game, you know, to keep raising my cows and my chickens and my vegetables. But yeah, it's just, I think it was because it was just so different. And a cool thing about A Wonderful Life is when you actually get to keep progressing, you have your kid, and you can like, this sounds really bad in a way, but it's really cool to see how you can influence your kid to pursue certain career, like either in music or art or like farming, depending on like who your character is friends with in the village. Yeah, like if your character is friends with like the musician guy who lives in like the hut, and you also take your kid there a lot, like your kid will have a lot of interest in music, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's really cool. And it's like each chapter of that game, your kid is like a little older, you know, like they start as a toddler and then they're like, you know, I don't know what you call them, like like older, like they're like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And then they're like, you know, a preteen, and then a teen, and then finally, like the last chapter, you technically, spoilers for A Wonderful Life, guys, your character dies, but you see what your kid decided to do with like their life. It's really interesting. Yeah, I don't know why that just grabbed me, because personally I never want kids myself. Like personally, like I like playing with, you know, my cousins like kids or something. Or if there's like kids around, I'm like, oh yeah, kids are cute, like they're
Yeah,
fun, but I'm
of
just
course.
like, I personally,
Yeah.
it's too much for me. I'll just play with like my nieces and nephews and be the fun auntie, I guess.
It's almost like you had a taste in that video game, and that's when you decided, nope, that's not happening for me, dude. This is rough,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. I was like, wow, that is so much work
Hmm.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do have to ask though, because what's interesting is that, it feels like your experience, especially during that era, is kind of aligned with some of your personal interests and what you want to do like in the future, or even, the kind of conversations you're creating with your videos. So the next thing that I want to know is like, did some of these experiences have a lot of influence on you when you were deciding on what to pursue in college? Like, because you mentioned that you had like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had like some form of like psychology degree or that you're working towards, or
So, like, I am very interested in like people, like the dynamics of people, and like both on a huge macro level, with like huge communities and nations and stuff, like different cultures interacting. But also like, on just a personal individual level. I want to know more about, what makes each individual like themselves, right? Political science had like less credits to have to obtain than international affairs. I did that, and then I like added on a social work major because social work also like incorporates like psychology, because we train to be like counselors and therapists, that kind of thing too. And so yeah, I would say that looking back on a lot of those games, like while I did enjoy like Super Mario Sunshine and stuff, the parts of games that really stuck with me were the ones that kind of explored people and also like their relationships with each other. I guess also trying a ton of different genres of games, it kind of made me interested in getting to know like people from a variety of different walks of life, kind of thing. That yeah, it was just kind of cool to see in social work, and also like in poly like sci, when you focus on the international part, like to read and study all those like case studies of people and communities like just interacting with each other and how life experience like shapes people. So yeah, I guess games did kind of influence in a way.
it kind of leads me, of course, to your YouTube channel because, for one, a lot of our guests in the past have told their stories of how they went from video games to, making content on YouTube and, of course, streaming and stuff. So, how did the creation of your YouTube channel come about then? Because these are very interesting, pieces that don't get combined together, like video games, psychology, and interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, thank you. That is a good question because I was trying to hit that sort of niche of like I don't see a lot of people talking about this in the video game sphere, and I feel like there's so much to say about it. So I was hoping to, like if I start, like maybe some other people might like do that too, and then we can have more of a like psychological, like socio-cultural what background of studying characters. But actually the real reason I started my YouTube channel was actually to make friends, really, because it's kind of funny. I just have the video that I posted today is like talking about this too, but basically, like long story short, I just transferred to like a really huge public institution from like the my first college just because the distance was too long, and I had really debilitating symptoms still due to my illness, transverse myelitis, so it wasn't feasible for me to like return to school. So at this new campus, I just like found it so hard to meet people and make friends in a way that I used to, just because a lot of my like physical disabilities made it hard to go to certain places on campus to meet people. And so I was watching a lot of YouTube then, and I saw a couple videos of some of my favorite YouTubers at the time talking about how one of the biggest benefits to them of starting their channel was they got to meet a lot of friends and really cool people that they never would have otherwise through YouTube. And so I was thinking like, oh my gosh, like, do I really want to do this? Do I want to try it? But because so many YouTubers seem to say that they've been able to make really good friendships with other content creators and things, I just decided to go for it. So in like November 2018, it's funny that the same week that I posted my first video ever, which was on Persona 3, I also started playing Trails in the Sky FC. I guess it's because Trails, as its own niche of like maybe channels that focus specifically on trails, there weren't that many, if at all, at the time. So I didn't know like I would be able to meet so many people through like trails as a catalyst, because the Persona videos, I feel like Persona was already a pretty big series by the time I started posting things in 2018. But somehow, like the trails videos I started posting in like February, it was like, wow, I think it's because this community is still so niche. There was just a lot more feedback and like opportunity to meet people through the trails content and videos. So that's how that came about. I just wanted to meet people and make friends, and I am so grateful that that's exactly what happened. And yeah, it's been an awesome journey for sure.
Definitely. Speaking of which, I also had Dominic Kaseki Nut here a few weeks ago, for the second time, because, I'm trying to bring everybody who showed up on the show on the audio only version to be back, on the video version, him and his pink
Excellent.
walls
Yes.
on his place. I don't know if you've seen it, but yeah, it's like so pink.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
holy crap.
His room.
And it's kind of really interesting is that, you telling the story of how you started your YouTube channel to meet people kind of really tracks with the story that he told me about how you guys met. And I felt that was so kind of poetic in a way that two people, and even more because February night will show up in a future episode that is not yet recorded as of today, but it will happen.
Yes.
And I just wanted to kind of point that out because I felt like that it did happen for you. You did meet some really incredible friends. And I just wanted to kind of point that out because, you started like 2016, you said something, 2016?
18. So
18.
it wasn't that, yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
Okay.
So it is really incredible to think that like, yeah, only really like 2-ish years later, I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
believe that I've met all these really awesome people. So
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate, yeah, the validation of like, yeah, it did happen for me, and it's just I'm so grateful for that. Yeah.
Definitely. Speaking of Dom, he actually like wanted to give you a message and he wanted to ask you something as well. So here he is.
Lady Virgilia, the OG. I think I can say that you're one of the people who really brought me into Trails, really sold me the magic as well of the series. Even though, of course, we both love the series equally. I'd like to think so equally, at least. Your story summaries really bring them to life, so thank you very much for that. And
Oh, I didn't know that.
in terms of the message I
Dang.
want to give you and stuff like that, besides your amazing personality, your amazing analysis videos and all this kind of stuff, I want to ask you, do you actually have like any merch that you're thinking about getting? I know you're into your persona and stuff like that as well, but obviously me, Feb, and all this kind of stuff, we get our merchandise and stuff like that. But are you interested in the Altina figure, or are you interested in the Reen figure that's about to come out and stuff like that?
Good
Or
question.
maybe even, maybe some East as well. I know they've got some Goro Akechi. Have they got a Goro Akechi figure? They might have a Goro Akechi figure. Possibly get that one as well. Whatever you want to do. But
They have
that's
a
basically what I want to ask.
figure.
Like,
Yes,
do you
they
have
do.
Do you have merchandise? Are you thinking about getting merchandise in the future? And maybe as well, if there is anything that comes out in the future, is there anything that's really standing out to you as something that you'd really want in, say, maybe the Trail series or the Persona series? Your choice, whatever it want to be, or maybe both, surprise me, whatever you want to do, surprise me with your answer. Yeah. All right, take it easy, lady. Thanks very much, and keep up your great work as always. You are amazing.
I will actually say I didn't even know, I didn't realize that like what the summaries kind of, help be sort of a catalyst, I guess, for TKN to make videos, because yeah, it's like I'm so grateful that, we were able to collab a little bit, and definitely we have more planned for the future. But yeah, it's cool to know that thanks to TKN, there will also be hopefully more and more people who kind of focus solely on trails for the most part, just like, when it comes to Persona and like Final Fantasy and all the Tales, all these other JRPGs, they have quite a bit of like a YouTube community sort of thing, right? Or Fire Emblem too, that's another one. So like, yeah, hopefully it won't be just me and TKN and I guess Feb that are just solely doing, trails, but more and more people. Yeah.
Yeah, I try to do some Trails content, but like it's only dependent on like how often Trails gets released here, and with the recent news that we're getting 1 next year and then all of a sudden 3 the following year, like I was like, I talked to my wife, because my wife and I often play these games, and I'm like, how are we gonna handle 2023? This is gonna be insane,
Exactly. It's like no sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like just play games and make videos. Like that's all. No sleep in 2023. Yeah. Nisa definitely that was just like a fulfillment of everyone's like far off dreams. Like people were thinking, oh please, though we're not gonna get our hopes up that much, but man, they really came through. And with Geofront too, that's so cool. So amazing. Yeah. But I guess as for like the actual question about merch, so I have a lot of like the limited edition of like both Persona game stuff and Trails stuff since Nisa took over. I have like all of that merch. But as you can clearly see, I just don't have a really good setup to like show any merch yet, but I definitely do want some like I would definitely like some Goro Akechi merch, and I do know they have multiple figures of him actually, like both in the Persona, like his Phantom Thief quotation mark attire, and his like regular detective attire and stuff too. But I also really want like prints. There's these really amazing artists on Twitter like Snip Art and Alina and stuff who make really cool like Persona or Trails, almost like graphic design art, just like cover, like they just look so cool like as a poster. And so I'm like, yeah, hopefully I can get those someday too, and actually have a setup that's not like this sad green screen right here that the camera like doesn't even, because I don't know how to work on my camera ratio, guys. I'm really good at computers, right? So someday guys, I can show off my merch. Like Feb, he still has like an okay like setup now, but he used to have a really cool merch wall for streams and stuff.
I'm definitely looking forward to that, like once I finally get to interview Feb and stuff and see, if that's changed or anything. Who knows? I think that'll be great. So, from making the YouTube channel and stuff, did you go right away into character studies, or did you have like a learning period? It feels to me, since you did start in 2018, the way that you edited things felt really natural. So it kind of just flowed, and it has its own very distinct tone that makes it feel like you've been doing this for years. Like even way beyond 2018. So that's why I wanted to kind of know, like, was it character studies right away, or did you kind of ease into that idea?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's really kind of you, because I sometimes when I look back at my old videos, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm more natural, like narrating and stuff now, and like the
Yeah.
audio is so much better now. But I think it might be because I just watched so many other YouTubers like character analyses in the past that I kind of had an idea of what I wanted mine to look like,
Okay.
And I guess like I actually originally came into YouTube wanting to do more of like the analyses aspect and stuff. Because when I started back in November 2018, I was only just starting playing Trails 2. So I didn't really know or even foresee that, like, wow, this series would do really well to have like some story summary kind of things, because it needs to be detailed enough, because these are long stories that really you do want to like dive into the depth of character writing that Falcom is really good at, but yet at the same time you just want to be like condensed enough. So I think it was because I was continuing to play these Trails games all throughout like November 2018 to, like I finished out in, I think, April of 2019 and stuff. I just got into the mindset of, what, I might sort of put a halt to a lot of the analyses videos for now, because those can just come whenever,
Right.
But like story summaries, because CS3 was coming out, that fall, I was thinking, oh, you know what, these are going to be my focus for now. So yeah, that's the scheduling.
Yeah, those are really great story summaries, and something that Dominic obviously also talked about on our episode and stuff. I wish I had found you when I was introducing my wife into Cold Steel, because that period that you mentioned was kind of fascinating, because the months leading up to Cold Steel 3, my wife and I played through Cold Steel 1 and 2, and she'd never played any of the games before, and to my knowledge, she doesn't intend to. There was somebody who I found who had story summaries for several of the games before, and then overnight somehow, or rather it felt like overnight, they took down all their videos. And I had mentioned that they can watch story summaries from them. And then somebody on the comments basically said, well, if you need story summaries, just go check out LadyVirgilia's YouTube channel. And that's actually how I found you, like, which is really fascinating.
Oh, well, thank you to that person for spreading the word for that little shill there. Thank you.
It really is. So, okay, obviously you have this huge interest in inter-character relationships and how people interact with each other, and having you talk to me about your interest in politics and international affairs, that sort of thing, that kind of brings your interest to Trails full circle in a way. Somebody in the comment thread for either one of my Trails reviews or my what game in the Cold Steel series should you play first, I think it's a legit question. They asked, like, I don't get why people call Trails a political game, because there's a lot of fantastical elements to it. What would you tell this person?
I guess I would tell this person that, like, I can see maybe where they're coming from, because I do think a lot of series that aren't just Trails, but like Final Fantasy or Fire Emblem that are set in, you know, like a different world, like their own made up world. They have all these fantastical elements that allows them to make some, like, I don't want to call like super political, but at least like some sort of like commentary on like some sort of societal value or like ideology or something, but it's more palatable because it's not set in like our modern world. So it's kind of hidden in the way of, oh, we're going to talk about the politics of Zemuria. It's just we're removed from that because we don't live in Zemuria. So it's not as, I guess, like distasteful, I think, when you're wondering like, why are they shoving the certain ideology like at me, right? That kind of thing. But I guess I will say that just because there are fantastical elements, it doesn't mean that there aren't like geopolitics involved. There is a huge amount of tension and pressure in the plot, right? About who is in power, really, and whose like interests are getting carried out like the most, right? So in that sense, if you can think about all the different people in government positions in Trails, like for example, like Osborne, right? If you can think about him and just how a lot of his actions affect other people, I would say that's an example of how there's still politics involved
Yeah.
in a game that's otherwise a fantasy continent
Yeah.
of Zemuria.
I agree with this because that just because there's no like Congress and the game isn't set in Congress doesn't mean that it can't be political, right? Like, you know, the numerous articles that have come out talking and covering Division 2, for example, you know, Tom Clancy's Division 2, and its statement within the game is a political statement in and of itself of what they choose and not choose to cover. And so if you know, and yes, that's a very blatant example of how you can inject politics in a game, but I've always seen the Cold Steel series, I think specifically, because, you know, very much rooted in the geopolitical conflict that's happening, you know, within that space. I'm trying to not talk about spoilers, but there's like a place that you visit very early on in Cold Steel 4 that you've been to in previous Trails games that is practically no longer on the map because of previous events. And if that isn't a political statement in and of itself, like, I don't know what is. Yes, there is an emotional aspect of it, but these are the lenses in which Falcom has decided to frame these kind of conflicts and stuff. And actually what's interesting about what you said is that because the conflict in Cold Steel is 1 degree removed from reality, from our reality, it makes it palatable. And I can't help but think that there's so many pieces of media that do very similar things, where they take 1 or 2 degrees away from reality, and therefore this subject matter that would be so uncomfortable to talk about in real life is now kind of okay to make fun of or even discuss in further detail or portray,
for sure,
you know, somewhere else.
Yeah, because it's not just like video games or JRPGs that do it. It's like, you know, of course, like literally like the fantasy genre for like books and things, you know, and also like I always think of like the Western RPG. Actually, the characters' decisions really affect like what goes down. Like the character is making very political decisions, you know, like I guess player action and like choice is more emphasized, I think, in Western RPG, kind of like I think of BioWare games, that kind of thing, with Dragon Age and Mass Effect and stuff. Like you said, how it's emotional because we get attached to the characters, right? But just because the character writing and all that stuff is very good, it doesn't negate the fact that there's also like political like lens in there too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a motif, right? It just so happens to be mixed with
Mhm.
a whole bunch of other things. So going from trails and persona and all that stuff, the character analysis videos that you made are really special because like it really makes it so that when viewers and fans of those games watch your content, they start seeing all these characters that they've loved in a very different lens. Can you talk to me a bit about like the concept behind that? Because I know that you've always had an interest in this. It's so apparent from our conversation today. But how do you go from like, all right, I have an interest in this to now I'm like, now I want to talk about this and delve deeper into the psyche of these individuals?
I guess it just comes from the fact that like I've always heard from, like online, people always talk about how they relate to certain characters,
Yes.
and it's very different for any individual. They'll relate to different characters. And because of that, I think of myself too as one of the biggest values I have is that I at least would like people to be able to understand where I'm coming from and at least respect that to a degree, in the sense where please respect that my life experiences is the reason why I do certain things or I am who I am today, that kind of thing, right? And so because of that, I also am always wanting to and trying to do that for like other people too. Because it's like, I can't expect respect if I'm not willing to do that myself to an extent to other people. And so because of that, fiction in general, like, and so trails, because it's in that same sort of medium of you're telling these characters stories that reflect real people, really. Like most writers, to write a realistic character, of course it's going to reflect real people. And so because of that, I always like to dive into these characters because I'd at least would hope that someone would be able to learn more about that character who they might not have otherwise understood, like their motivations or their life experience or something. I don't have any intention of trying to make people like certain characters, but I at least would hope that they come around to thinking, oh, I at least understand them more. Even if I still don't like them, it's just like, well, I at least understand, that kind of thing.
It's so interesting because, like, compared to the first time we spoke, our conversation today kind of really paints this picture of me that you're a very empathetic person. And, and I feel like the more that I talk to you and the more we kind of get to know you a bit better today, like, that's ringing true and true, especially with how you talk about your character analyses. It's like your desire to want people to understand where other people are coming from by kind of taking a very different route than everybody else is doing. Like, it's not a review. No, we're just gonna literally focus on we're literally gonna focus on one of the characters in the Trail series and stuff that I can name any. The reason why I picked On was because that was actually the first character analysis that I watched from you in a long time. Like before that I'd watched all the others and then recently I rewatched the On one and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I really like this one.
Yeah, thank you. I really like making that one too, for sure.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So that being said, our previous guest actually has a question for you about these character analyses videos. You might have known him, been around for, since the early 2010s, because he's been making content for that long. His name is Super Derek. He covers a lot of JRPGs. He's so great. He's so awesome.
Awesome.
And I'm sorry, Derek, I have to say, because you're so giggly when you were doing this, he was a little bit nervous making this video, but here he is. He has a message for you, and he has a very important question, which I want to know the answer to as well. So take it away, Derek.
Hey, Lady Virgilia. Super Derek here. Good to see you. Thank you for taking my message. But seriously, thank you so much, Lady Virgilia, for your continued work in making these awesome videos, these deep dives into various characters from these amazing series. Like, I can't imagine putting that much time and effort into these individual character dissections and seeing how they work and what makes them tick. And what you're doing has just been really incredible. So please keep up the great work. So I was looking through your channel earlier. I was looking through all of your awesome videos
Thank
about
you.
trails. And I had to ask, there was one thing that I noticed that stuck out to me like a sore thumb. And that's, why don't you have a dedicated video about Olivier as objectively the best Kiseki series character in existence? I mean, just objectively. But if you disagree, who would
He's
you
a
say
beautiful
is
man.
your most favorite character
Ollie.
from the Kiseki series, and why is it Olivier? Or not, I guess. Thank you for taking my question.
So that's a really good question. Honestly, this is probably like it sounds like such a simple explanation, but it's mostly just because I feel like I don't have a lot of really good gameplay like footage. So like in FC and everything, I was still playing on my gaming laptop because I was still I was away from home, so I didn't have like a PC or anything. I was at like my other school campus, so I just didn't have a like powerful enough system to like record really good footage and also like run the game at the same time. It like that's how the system was. And so because of that, I feel eventually I want to get into doing character analyses for Olivier and a lot of the Sky characters that have a lot of stuff going on in FC, because I borrowed people's footage for a lot of like for the Estelle like analysis, for example, but I prefer to use my own. So because of that, I was able to stick to characters like Ren, for example, that a lot of their stuff is later on in the games where I have my own footage recorded for like SC and third. But yeah, for characters like Ollie and Chloe and Shara and a lot of those people in Sky, and then especially now for Crossbell, because not only Geofront, even though like the patches are of course down now, because we're getting official localization soon, woo!
Yeah.
But because of that, like I don't want to use footage of the old translation for these character analyses. So because of that, it'll be a while, I think, before I get to do analyses for these main characters of like the Sky and Crossbow arcs, just because I still need to re-record all of this like nice footage for them. Yeah, so that's pretty much the answer of why I don't have an Ollie video yet. But the best character in Kiseki is Kevin Graham. Yes. That is the definitive fact, right, guys?
And you're gonna make a character analysis of him sometime?
Yes, I will. I think the cool thing for him is that I could actually probably do that because he's not really an FC, so just saying, like maybe I can, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe I can. That's a good like little. Now I have like a little bud in my head thinking about, okay, maybe Kevin Graham analysis soon.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe in 2 months when this actually comes out from this recording, it'll be out.
Yeah,
and this is like a
it'll be out,
promo.
maybe.
Yeah, maybe. It'll be a promo for it. I don't know.
Yes. Thanks, Alex, for thinking ahead of time, right? Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like so many days in advance. My goodness.
Yeah. But I just wanted to comment on Super Derek. It was so cool the way I actually met him, or his content for the most part was like Baku-san, who JRPG, who's like a pretty awesome streamer on Twitch and everything. Like, I guess him and like Super Derek were, you know, pretty good friends and everything, like back when Derek was going through Sky and everything. And so yeah, that's how like I got to know him and his content a little bit. It was just like, oh, through a mutual friend, Baku-san. So thanks, Baku. He connects people a lot.
You know, that's a funny thing because as with Keon and you guys were basically referred to by a previous guest. I haven't gotten around to contacting Baku because Super Derek's literally like, oh, Baku's going to be a great guest on here. And I'm like thinking to myself just now as you're saying this, Derek's already been on the show twice. And Baku has yet to show up once. But that will be rectified. That will be rectified.
Yes,
Hopefully.
you love to hear it. That's gonna be an awesome episode for sure.
Yeah, I'm always looking forward to meeting new people and stuff. So I think that'll be a really awesome episode. But that being said, time is our enemy, and we have yet run out of time. We didn't even touch upon Final Fantasy 14, and I promised Dom at some point I will bring you and him back to start talking about 14. It will happen eventually. Maybe both of you at the same time.
Shield FF14 to me, so it's like, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to start playing it now.
Right? Yeah, totally. So that being said, we definitely went on quite a journey today to talk about when you were young, to your interest in international affairs and social work and all that stuff. And of course, eventually getting you to a point where you're talking about character analyses for characters on YouTube, where you now have like more than 7,000 subscribers, which is an amazing thing. And
thank you.
You're welcome. And I do want to ask you if there is some form of advice that you can give people who are probably reluctant in making their own content or wanting to be part of this industry of video games. When people think about video games, people seem to only think like, oh, making video games, right? Or that sort of thing. But there's so many other avenues, and you've obviously demonstrated a very valid avenue with the different perspectives that you provide. So I'd love to hear any sort of advice that you can give them, or words of encouragement even.
What I would like to say is just, if you have an idea that you just want to be out there, and you want to share a certain idea about a certain game, I think just go for it. There are programs that make video editing, like simple video editing, really easy and even like free in some cases. And the best thing about, I think, video content and things is that you can self-teach yourself that with how many videos of certain programs there are on YouTube about how to use all this different software. Like even like, for example, if you do happen to have like Premiere, like there's so many people who on YouTube focus specifically on teaching people how to use those programs. So I just say, like, don't be afraid to make the content and just put it out there. And I will say, if you feel like that whole, oh, no one's watching my content kind of feeling or whatever, I will say that, like, just keep going, that I think that's the main thing, is that sometimes it can get discouraging if you want, people to see your argument for something or your idea, but you're not getting a lot of like views at first. Just keep making content, keep being involved in other communities, either like on Reddit, on Twitter, on Discord. And I don't mean just to like shill yourself, but to truly like get involved and make friends in those communities. And then just like share your videos there and just keep putting out content. Don't give up. And I think eventually it'll come around. I think that's the main thing, is that sometimes it can be a little discouraging too, to know like, I worked on that video and no one watched it at first. But yeah, if you keep going at it, I think eventually yeah, you'll find people who are interested.
And definitely having a great attitude, right? Like there's a book that I read a few years ago about the wrestler Chris Jericho, and one of the things that he said was that whether you're in, and he's talking about from a perspective of a musician. He said, whether we're in a room filled with 20 people or we're in a stadium filled with 15,000, be grateful of everybody who you come across, because really, like, you'll never know when you'll come across them again, and you get, and to give them the moment, make every moment feel special. And I think, that's a lot of what you exude today and stuff, and what we talked about. And I think that's actually really, truly special.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a nice message. Thank you. Yeah.
And of course, like, if people want to find more of your energy, all of your really great content, where can people find you online?
Well, as we were talking about today, you can find me first and foremost on LadyVirgilia on YouTube. But I also do stream on Twitch, and that's the place where I really like to just get to know you guys in like a live setting where I could actually chat with you guys and not just, respond to comments on YouTube. It's a different feeling, right? And then of course also on Twitter, you can find me there, but I'm sorry, the name is switched. So it's at Virgilia Lady, because of course someone had to take LadyVirgilia before I made it. So yeah. I guess that's it.
Yeah, that happened to me with Backlog Battle. Some dude had it since 2012, and they've only made like maybe one tweet, and I keep poking at like Twitter. I'm like, hey man, they're not using it, and they're like, nah, whatever. It's okay. But of course, if you have been watching this on the video version of the podcast, you've probably seen it, all that information underneath LadyVirgilia. So you have no excuse. You should check out her channel as soon as possible so you can be informed of all her great content. So I just want to thank you again, Lady, for joining us again. And maybe once Endwalker comes, we'll talk about 14 or something.
More 14 shilling. All right. I guess I'll expect that from you guys. But thank you so much, Alex, for having me again. It's been such a blast. Yeah.
Absolutely no problem. And of course, thank you to everybody who's joined us today on the show. Be sure to check out next week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Pacific time, midnight, because that's really crazy. I don't know why we release it at midnight, but it always works out. And of course, check out the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Backlog Battle Podcast, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to see Lady's awesome LED headsets that we've been talking about this whole time. But if you do prefer audio, you can always subscribe to the podcast on every podcast software out there, and all the links can be found on anchor.fm/Backlog Battle. So until next week, we'll see you guys later, and happy gaming.